9, Department of Health, State of Hawaii versus County of Hawaii, docket numbers 13-SWH-SWS-012 and 14-SHW-SWS-003 from Deputy Corporation Counsel Amy G. Self, dated January 5, 2015, requesting an attorney-client confidential discussion to consult with the council regarding proposed settlement agreement related to the above entitled notices and findings of violations.
Thank you. Ms. Eoff.
I move to convene an executive session
Second.
regarding Communication 69 pursuant to Section 92-5A4 for the purpose of consulting with our attorney.
It's been moved by Ms. Eoff and seconded by Mr. Paleka to move into executive session. Any discussion? Ms. Willie.
Yeah, I'd like to know why we have to do it in executive session.
I think we can ask our corporation counsel.
Okay. I mean, the numbers are all out there. There's all generally public, and we can.
Good morning, Chair Kanuha, members of the Hawaii County Council, Corporation Counsel Molly Stebbins. Amy Self is the deputy who's handling this matter. I think she's on her way and she can better address that question, but we recommend, anytime there's a situation involving litigation and discussion of a settlement, that it be done in executive session so that you can freely consult and hear from the attorney advising you in the matter.
But the public does, this is sort of, there's a lot of public information.
Maybe the council can take a brief recess, and when she arrives, she can address that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other discussion? But hearing from what has been discussed, I think we should wait for Ms. Self to get here, obviously. So we'll take a brief recess, council members. We're in recess. Okay, we are coming out of recess. I think we had a question, Miss Willie.
Yeah, Amy, if you could come up. I sort of asked for some explanation so the public would know what's sort of a little bit of framework what's going on, and that's something that we have tried to do a little bit when there is something to do with a settlement. In this case, pretty much no one knows what is happening, and give some kind of overview. You don't have to get into the obviously specifics of the proposed settlement, but I think that it's appropriate. It's certainly on people's mind, and how the counties here, or how whatever the contractor, just whatever you can say to sort of allow the public to be informed of what's happening.
Okay, Deputy Corporation Counsel Amy Self. Well, the reason we need to go into executive session, obviously, is because we're still in settlement negotiations with the Department of Health, and until a settlement is reached, until it's signed, it's not public record, and so we need to be able to discuss this. You need to be able to discuss this freely with your attorney in executive session. The fines themselves, you're correct, it's public knowledge because the notices of violation, it was already written about in the paper. And so the settlement agreement, though, is something that needs to be discussed because we need your approval in order to settle. And so the details of the settlement need to be discussed in executive session.
But could you just, when you're saying the settlement and the fines, what the fines are for, just sort of what is it that we're dealing with here?
Well, there were violations and this took place quite some time ago. The violations have already been corrected, but it's all in your materials. if you'd like, I could have the department explain to you about the violations, but
I think the
It's-
violations are public. You can look them up on the
Yeah,
internet.
they are
So I
public.
just felt, before we go and discuss the settlement in executive session, just to say something so the public knows what kind of violations, what this is all about. There's
Well-
certainly a lot of public concern.
Well, for instance, as I said, the violations have already been corrected. It was corrected quite some time ago, but one of the violations was at the Puanahulu landfill, where there was scrap metal piled up, and so they didn't have a permit to allow for the scrap metal being piled up.
Yeah, could I bring either Greg or
Greg Goodale.
Yeah, good morning. Greg Goodale, Solid Waste Division Chief. Yeah, I think I could probably go into what some of the circumstance and the Puanahulu situation that Amy was discussing. We were in a situation where we were between contracts with scrap metal removal, and rather than having the scrap metal going into the landfill, because we didn't have a contract to be able to take the scrap metal, the metal was accumulating in a holding area at the Puanahulu landfill, waiting for the contract to get finalized. Once the contract got finalized, then all the scrap metal was removed from that location and taken to a scrap metal processing facility. Through the normal contract process. But what DOH essentially had the notice of violation was for storing that metal without having that permitted. So.
Okay, I really appreciate your explaining that. And if you could just quickly run through what the other situations were.
Okay, so there was a situation at the Hilo landfill where the inspector felt that the county hadn't put adequate daily cover. The county is required to put 6 inches of daily cover, or what they call alternative daily cover. And we were in a situation where the alternative daily cover, which basically consists of tarps, weren't adequate. We had new tarps on order that were waiting. They were in transit to the county, but we hadn't received them yet. But the inspector felt that the ones that were being utilized weren't adequate, and so essentially wrote said that we were in violation of the daily cover. But as Amy's pointed out, all those things have been rectified. We've gotten the new tarps. We've put the adequate amount of cover material. So there aren't any, there's no existing condition, or matter of fact, all those things were corrected more or less right when the state brought them to our attention, that they felt like that was the status that we were in.
Is that the methane one, or is that?
There was a circumstance where we had equipment that was not functioning properly during a groundwater monitoring event, and actually it was our consultant that made the decision not to conduct the gas monitoring. And just let me make this clear: we've never ever had landfill gas show up in any sampling round at the Hilo landfill in the history that we've conducted the monitoring, which has been, decades. And we've never had any violation of groundwater monitoring standards. Again, it doesn't excuse missing the round. It's part of the obligation that we have, is to do those rounds. We've essentially corrected that with our consultant, making it clear that under no circumstance do we miss an event due to equipment. We'll get the equipment in any which way we need to make sure these sampling events occur.
And was there a tire? Was there one more?
The tire, there were tires that apparently the inspector at the time saw come in. We have people that illegally dump tires into loads that come in from all over the county, and we have our operators at the landfills that are there to not only to watch for the tires, but for any other kinds of things that shouldn't be coming into the landfill. And apparently there was tires that were observed on that day. So the inspector, in addition to the cover material, wrote that onto his inspection record, was the tires that were found.
I mean, when I look up on the site, just their public site, it appears that,
Point of order. Do you have a motion on the floor?
You have your light.
I'm sorry. Do we have a motion to go into executive session?
Motion to go into executive session on the
I was
matter.
wondering if this line of questioning is germane to that motion. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I tend to agree with Ms. Willie. I don't think an executive session is necessary, but I'd like to dispense with the motion.
can I respond to that?
Yes, you may.
Aaron and others, I'm not sure that all of what could be discussed needs to be done in executive session. And I'm basically looking at what is in public so the public understands what we're doing. All of this, I think, would have been said during the executive session, sort of giving us the context why the settlement. And I don't think that this is apropos, and I will stay within my time limit.
And may I
Yes,
respond
Mr.
to that? And then I would ask Ms. Willie to frame a motion in that regard. For example, to have the department explain to us certain things until such time that it intrudes upon the confidentiality or, that kind of stuff. But, right now, all we have is a motion to go into executive session, and I just think we're going too far afield.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. I agree with that line of reasoning, and I think this specific item needs to be dispensed on by, needs to be properly agendized for informational purposes with the community. But as we have on our agenda, the Communication 69 to go into executive session on the attorney-client privilege, I think that's the motion that we need to be talking about currently on why we need to go into the executive session. But I think for discussion purposes as we're going into, that needs to be a whole separate item. But as far as we're going, the public knows why we're going into the executive session, and I think we need to move forward right now if we're going to move into executive session to discuss with our attorneys.
Okay, I want to respond to that. I'm just trying to sort out what can be done without going into executive session. And I think there's certainly been a lot of public concern. I think the most recent time was Tim Reese and bringing up, allowing the public to hear what's going on. It's an issue of concern. We're only going over sort of what is happening, not what is the settlement. So, and we have many violations.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. I think the discussion purposes needs to focus on the executive session. So, Ms. Ms. Poindexter.
Yeah, I agree that the motion is to whether or not we're going to executive session. And the question is, after the executive session, then the discussion, would that be more appropriate for that to happen after we get out of executive session during that time?
Well, let's just focus currently on the motion on the floor. Mr. Chung.
Yeah, speaking against the motion, I'm kind of looking at what's been submitted to us, and without divulging what's contained therein, it appears that an agreement has been struck between the county and the Department of Health. And the council's action is basically pro forma. That's what I gather from all of this. I could be wrong. I think we don't need to go into an executive session. And if something happens during the course of our open discussion, then certainly, we can decide to go into an executive session at that point. But it really looks like everything's just set, and all you need is the council's approval to say, okay. And then I really don't mind the questions that were coming out. I just want to kind of stick with the program here. Yeah. So I'm speaking against going into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. I think Mr. Paleka. Oh, okay, Ms. Willie.
Just that I agree with Mr. Chung, and if something does come up where we need to, we'll respond appropriately, but anyway, I agree.
Okay, thank you. The motion on the floor is to, Mr. Clerk.
If I could just make a recommendation, it appears that the council is interested in going into this matter right now and then determining if executive session may be necessary. I believe it'd be better to withdraw the motion. That way you can preserve that opportunity as opposed to perhaps, we don't know, but maybe voting it down and then we might not be able to do that again. So if that's the will of the council to kind of start this process and then determine during the process if it's necessary, it might be better to preserve that opportunity by withdrawing the motion.
Thank you. I would like to hear from our Corporation Counsel.
Well, the problem is that we need council approval to settle any matters over $10,000. So that's the predicament we're in. If you want to discuss this at all, then we need to go into executive session. If you propose to not go into executive session and not discuss it at all and just vote on it, then that's fine, but we definitely need your approval, otherwise we can't settle it.
Thank you. Mr. Ilagan, I think you were next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you're saying that any discussion you'd prefer to have in executive session?
With regards to the settlement agreement, yes, because we're still in negotiations with the Department of Health, and that is confidential until such time as we have signed off on an agreement. So that's what we need to discuss in executive session, is whether or not you guys want to approve this or if you want me to go back to the bargaining table. And none of that can be discussed unless we're in executive session.
So I wanted to also ask, what could happen if we don't discuss it in an executive session?
Well, I'm just saying that we need to get your approval, so you have to actually vote, and sometimes it seems that you don't want to vote on things unless you've discussed it previously. So I think it would be safer to go in executive session in case you want to discuss the actual settlement agreement.
Okay. I'm going to yield at this time and hear the other council members' decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Ilagan. Mr. Chung.
Yeah, I guess what's confusing to me, and again, I'm going to read some excerpts from this without really divulging the amounts, but it says, after many months of negotiating with DOH, we're able to convince them to blah, 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 blah. And then at the end, it says, recommendation that the council authorize the terms of the agreement. So it doesn't say the proposed agreement or, or allow us to continue negotiating. It seems that something has been put in place already. And that's the only reason why I'm saying let's just do it in open, in an open session. But, if it is confidential and if it's going to jeopardize the negotiations, then by all means, we should go into an executive session. But I'm just reading what's
those are the proposed terms. They have not been, nobody has signed the agreement yet.
I mean, obviously, because you have to get authorization from this board first. But in concept, have things been agreed upon? And is it all that you need is the council's approval to formalize this agreement, or is there more to it than that?
Yes, we do need council's approval because it's over $10,000. So nobody can sign the agreement until we have that approval from the council.
Right. No, but what I'm asking is that all you need? So in other words, once we approve, then it's good already, or is there more to it than that?
Mayor has to.
Bobby, yeah.
Yes, you just mentioned too, also the mayor has to agree to it.
Councilmember Chung?
Yes.
I'm actually, at the moment, more concerned about how you have it on the agenda and whether we can discuss stuff if you don't go into executive session, because it's agendized as an executive session. It's not on your regular agenda. So if you don't go into executive session, I'm not sure if the Sunshine Law allows you to treat this as a regular agenda item and just have the open discussion. It may mean that you would have to put it over to another meeting. And so I think after you come out of executive session, you can then, vote to agree, to not agree with the recommendation of Corporation Counsel. Once this goes to the mayor and he's willing to sign off on it, then it's public. But at any point, whether if you folks disagree with the settlement or if the mayor disagrees with the settlement, then it's not binding.
Yeah,
Mr. Chung.
That's an interesting point that, Bobby Jean brought up. Yeah. But, it just makes me believe that the way we have things set up puts us in, between a rock and a hard place. Because if you bring it up as a regular agenda item, then you have to disclose certain bits of information in the communication. And I'm assuming that if that's the case, then you as a Corp Counsel can at that time request an executive session. But if it comes up as a referral for an executive session, we have no choice but to go into an executive session or to hold it over at some point. So that's kind of weird to me. But, I guess what we can do then, I'll support the executive session, and hopefully after that's done, we could provide some information in public. Is that all right?
Well, you have to vote on it in
Right.
the public anyway. You can't vote in executive session. But the other thing, too, is the public has already been aware of this. This was in the newspaper. This didn't happen yesterday. This happened, when was it? Back.
The violations are the early part, I think it was like February of 2013.
Yeah.
I think we may have actually corrected the violations even before the actual order came out, because we were in the process of doing that. And it's just that it takes a long time, and we've had some, back and forth, and would like perhaps the opportunity to explain some of the verbiage and what it means.
I still feel that, everything contained here is, should be open to the public. But I guess in deference to this kind of screwed up procedure that we have, I'll vote in favor of the executive session, and hopefully we can correct it at some point.
We as far as I know, we would never put a settlement agreement that has not been, we can't even sign the settlement agreement until we have your approval and have the mayor's approval. So there's no way that we would put this on the regular agenda to begin with, because settlement agreements.
Your microphone.
We cannot discuss them.
Yeah, I'm fully aware of that, Amy. It's just that I'm just wondering whether this is just pro forma, or whether you are still in the process of negotiations, and whether it becoming public will jeopardize those negotiations. And it doesn't seem that way to me, but I could be wrong.
We were in negotiations up to half an hour ago, Mr. Cho. We were just on the phone with Department of Health on some of the language.
So it's not set then? This is a proposal.
If you go with this proposal, then it will become set, but we would want to explain some of the negotiations that were going on until about half an hour ago, when Mr. Goodale was still speaking to Department of Health.
Depending on what happened this morning, we were actually going to be discussing whether or not you would agree to a particular change to one of the terms, but that may not be necessary. But this is another one of the reasons why we need to go into executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chung. Ms. Poindexter.
I agree that we should go into executive session because it's a settlement agreement that we got to discuss. And like you said, you're real clear. We cannot discuss settlement agreements in public because it's not public knowledge yet. And so it's just a given. Any settlement agreement, we all got to discuss about the settlement agreement in executive session. So I am supporting going into executive session.
Thank you. Real quickly, Ms. Willie,
Yeah.
I'll give you some little latitude.
Yeah, real quickly, with regard to Councilmember Chun's question and your response that this is referred for executive session, until we vote on it, it's not referred to executive session. We vote on that. So that's not a done deal. It's not that it's done. And I think that discussing what the violations are is not part of the settlement and getting it clear so the public understands. And I don't think the way it's written up does provide very, adequate information, such and such violations number X and Y and Z. So my question really is, then once we do discuss it and we come out and vote, are we then at liberty to say publicly what the settlement is and discuss those terms?
Not until the settlement agreement is signed. It has to also be approved by the mayor.
And then when does it come back to us so we can discuss it? Why can't we discuss what we've agreed to?
Because it's a settlement agreement. It's
Okay, so at least what I was trying to do before, because concerned that this is the direction we were going, was to at least get out to the public what the violations are
And we've
why
done
why we're getting to the point of settling it. Okay.
And we answered your questions regarding the violations.
okay,
The violations
right.
are not, it's public knowledge. It was in the newspaper right after it happened.
But it wasn't well stated here, so I wanted it stated so that people who are watching this, who don't maybe have that information and don't all read the paper, knowledgeable. I'm going to stop there and go ahead, but those were my concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Willie. Ms. David.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Self. I really have a question, and I understand what Mr. Councilmember Chung is saying about the need. It seems that this is already basically an agreement has been reached. But my question is, whatever we decide, whether we agree with Mr. Chung or not, in any settlement agreement or any matter that comes before the council from now on, I think what we're talking about here, how does it affect or impact personal, litigation for personal injury? I know this is some of the violations are already public knowledge, but what we are going to be deciding here, how does it impact things that are not necessarily public knowledge, since we're discussing executive session matters, like a personal injury issues that have to come to us? How would our procedures, does this set a precedent in how we deal with future executive session matters?
This is a little bit different because it's not like the normal litigation cases that come to you.
That's what I'm saying. I understand what Councilman Chung is saying, and I'm just trying to find.
But the reason we had to bring it is because it affects, it's the money issue. It's, if you, I don't know what you want to do, and I can't, if only one of you says, well, it's already a done deal, we don't need to go to executive session, but I can't, you don't know whether the whole council or enough members are going to approve it, and without your approval, I have no guidance on what you want me to do. If we go into executive session, if some of you express that you don't agree with the amount or whatever, and you send me back to DOH to renegotiate, then at least I know what I'm looking at, what amount am I going to go for. But I have no direction unless you guys will tell me what you want to do. If you approve it, that's fine. And, but if you don't, that's what concerns me. There may be some of you who don't approve of the amount or some of the terms, and so I need to hear that so that I know what to do. Or it's not a done deal. I mean, just because we've agreed in, principle with DOH, that's all we have. And DOH is very aware. They wanted us to sign this. They gave us only 10 days to sign this. And I talked to the Deputy Attorney General, explained to her, look, this is something that we have to get council approval for. And she totally understood that. So now, we have until we get your approval to move forward with this. So if you have a different way you want me to bring this up, just let me know, but I cannot discuss.
Your microphone. Your microphone.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just trying to sort this through in my own mind, like Mr. Councilmember Chung. So, and I really believe that the people's right to know. I also support that, Margaret. But I see we're here in a pickle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Paleka.
Yeah, I just would like to reiterate what Margaret was bringing up, because there's other interests for the public, like how we can avoid, and we'd like to ask those questions to the director, staying out of the scope of the settlement, but being assured, or where we can reassure the public that these violations won't occur again, or who's the accountability. Those kind of interests and questions also need to be asked when dealing with the settlement, I believe. And but if we are going to focus on the settlement itself, then we go into executive session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paleka. Mr. Onishi.
Mr. Chung, what's first?
I'm going to cut off the date pretty soon so that we can vote off on this executive session.
I just wanted to move forward. I mean, maybe at the next time when we have something like this, then hopefully the chair and the clerk's office, you guys can, I guess look at it more clearly and then see if we can be posted on the agenda for more discussion. But for this one, I think it's like a little bit too late. It's here. Either we go into executive session or we don't. And that's the bottom line. So I would like to call for the question.
Before I get a second, I just wanted to tell I was going to cut off the debate so that we can vote on this matter. So, Mr. Clerk, I'm going to, there's a motion on the floor to go into executive session, so we'll do a roll call.
On the motion to enter an executive session, Mr. Chung.
Aye.
Ms. David.
Aye.
Ms. Yoff.
Aye.
Mr. Ilagan.
Aye.
Mr. Onishi.
Aye.
Mr. Paleka.
Aye.
Ms. Poindexter.
Aye.
Ms. Willie.
Aye.
Chair Kunuha.
Aye.
Chair Kunuha, you have 9 ayes.
Thank you. We are now going into executive session. Ask for a motion to concur with the recommendations of Corporation Council.
So moved.
So moved.
It's been moved by Ms. Poindexter and seconded by Ms. Wheelie. Okay, is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That's 9 ayes. Thank you very much. Motion is approved. It's been moved by somebody to adjourn. Miss David to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Onishi. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, council members.
Ah.